I never thought owning a snow plow would turn me into the villain of Riverside Heights. But here I was, sitting in my living room while 3 feet of fresh powder buried the entire neighborhood under a blanket of white chaos. My name is Jack Morrison, and I have lived in this subdivision outside of Rochester, New York for the past 8 years. When I moved here, the place seemed perfect. Nice houses, decent people, and best of all, I bought a corner lot with extra driveway space for my business equipment. I run a landscaping company called Morrison's Property Services, and during winter months, I pivot to snow removal. It is good money, keeps my crew employed year-round, and honestly, I enjoy the work. There is something satisfying about clearing a driveway and seeing the relief on a client's face when they realize they can actually get to work that morning. The trouble started 3 months ago when the HOA got a new president. Her name was Patricia Hendricks, and she was exactly what you would picture when someone says HOA Karen. Mid-50s, blonde highlights that looked like they cost more than my monthly truck payment, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She moved into the neighborhood about 2 years back and immediately started attending every single HOA meeting, taking notes, and pointing out violations that nobody else seemed to care about. When the previous HOA president, a retired teacher named Mr. Chen, decided he had enough and stepped down, Patricia practically sprinted to fill the vacancy. The vote happened at a meeting that maybe 15 people attended out of the 200 homes in our subdivision. She won by 8 votes. Most people did not even know there was an election happening. Her first act as president was to send out a newsletter. Not an email, mind you, but an actual printed newsletter that probably cost the HOA $300 to produce and mail. It was titled A New Era for Riverside Heights, and contained about 4 pages of new rules she wanted to implement. Some of them were reasonable, like asking people to bring their trash cans in within 12 hours of pickup instead of leaving them on the curb for days. Others were ridiculous, like the suggestion that all houses should be painted in approved colors from a palette she personally selected. I mostly ignored it. I paid my HOA dues on time, kept my lawn maintained, and did not cause problems. My work truck was usually parked in my driveway or out on jobs. During winter, I kept my plow truck on the street sometimes because my driveway was not quite long enough to accommodate both my personal vehicle and the truck with the plow blade attached. The truck stuck out maybe 2 feet past my property line, parked legally on the public street. Nobody had ever complained about it before. Then November rolled around, and I got my first nastogram from Patricia. It arrived in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon, printed on HOA letterhead that she apparently had made. The letter informed me that commercial vehicles were not permitted to be parked on the street overnight per HOA regulations, and I needed to remove my truck immediately or face fines. I read the letter 3 times, then pulled out my copy of the HOA bylaws. I had gotten them when I bought the house, and they were sitting in a filing cabinet in my home office. I spent an hour going through every page. There was absolutely nothing about commercial vehicles anywhere in the document. There was a section about abandoned vehicles and one about boats or RVs being stored on properties, but nothing about work trucks. I called Patricia's number, which was listed at the bottom of the letter. She answered on the 3rd ring with a voice that sounded like she was already irritated. Patricia Hendricks, HOA president. Hi Patricia, this is Jack Morrison from 447 Maple Drive. I got your letter about my truck, and I wanted to discuss it with you. There is nothing to discuss, Mr. Morrison. The rules are clear. Actually, I just read through the entire HOA bylaws, and there is no mention of commercial vehicles. Could you point me to the specific section you are referring to? There was a pause. I could hear her breathing on the other end, and I imagined her face was turning red. It is an aesthetic issue, Mr. Morrison. Your truck is an eyesore, and several neighbors have complained. Which neighbors? And if it is not in the bylaws, how can you enforce it? The HOA board has the authority to make reasonable rules for the betterment of the community. If you refuse to comply, we will have no choice but to issue fines. I would like to see this in writing from the board, not just you. And I would like to know who complained, because I have a right to face my accusers at an HOA meeting. She hung up on me. Just clicked off the call without another word. I sat there staring at my phone, shocked that an adult human being would act like that. A week later, I got another letter. This one stated that the HOA board had voted to create a new rule prohibiting commercial vehicles from being parked on neighborhood streets between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. The fine for violation was $100 per occurrence. The letter was signed by Patricia and two other board members I had never heard of. I did some digging and found out that the board consisted of Patricia, her friend Deborah Walsh, who lived 3 doors down from her, and a guy named Tim Porter, who was apparently Deborah's brother-in-law. The 3 of them had appointed themselves to the board after the previous members all resigned in frustration. According to the bylaws, board members were supposed to be elected at an annual meeting with a quorum of homeowners present. None of that had happened. I started parking my truck in front of my house around 7:45 p.m. every night and moving it by 8:01 a.m. every morning, just to be petty. Patricia noticed, of course, and I got another letter saying that I was violating the spirit of the rule. I ignored it. December arrived, and with it came the snow. Rochester winters are no joke. We regularly get buried under feet of snow, and the city has an entire fleet of plows working around the clock during big storms. Our subdivision, being a private community, was responsible for its own snow removal on the internal streets. The HOA had always contracted with a local company to handle it, paying them out of our dues. Here is where things got interesting. I ran into Tim Porter at the gas station one morning in early December. He looked exhausted, and when I asked him what was wrong, he told me that Patricia had fired the snow removal company to cut costs and had decided to let nature take its course with the snow this year. What does that even mean? I asked him. I have no idea, man. She said people have SUVs and they can handle a little snow. I tried to tell her that is insane, but she does not listen to anyone. I went home and checked the HOA budget, which was supposed to be shared with all homeowners annually. Sure enough, Patricia had cut the snow removal line item completely, saving about $12,000. She had reallocated that money to beautification projects, which apparently meant new signs at the subdivision entrance with her name on them as HOA president. The first real snow came on December 18th. We got about 8 inches overnight, and by morning, the subdivision streets were a mess. I got up early, fired up my plow truck, and headed out to handle my contracted clients. As I was leaving, I noticed several neighbors trying to dig their cars out, spinning tires and generally struggling. The main road through the subdivision had not been touched. I felt bad. These were my neighbors, people I had known for years. So after I finished my paying jobs, I came back around 2 p.m. and spent 2 hours plowing the main roads in our subdivision. I did not charge anything, just did it to be helpful. I cleared Maple Drive, Oak Street, and the main loop road. People waved at me, gave me thumbs up, and a few even came out to thank me. That evening I got a phone call from Patricia. "Mr. Morrison, I need you to stop plowing the subdivision streets immediately." "Excuse me, You are performing unauthorized work on HOA property. You do not have a contract with us and you are creating a liability issue. Patricia, I was helping people. The roads were dangerous. That is not your decision to make. The HOA will handle snow removal as we see fit. You fired the snow removal company. Nobody is handling it. That is none of your concern. If you continue to plow without authorization, I will have your truck towed for being illegally parked on HOA property. I almost laughed. The streets are public roads, Patricia. The HOA does not own them. We have an easement and maintenance responsibility. Do not test me on this, Mr. Morrison. She hung up again. I sat there wondering what kind of person gets angry at someone for plowing snow for free. 2 days later, we got another storm. This one dropped 14 inches. I went out and did my client jobs again, but this time I did not touch the subdivision roads. If Patricia wanted to play games, I would let her. The roads became almost impassable. People were getting stuck, having to push each other out and walking to the main highway to catch rides to work because they could not get their cars out. My phone started ringing. Neighbors asking if I could plow their streets. I explained the situation with Patricia, and every single person was furious with her. A few of them said they were going to call her and complain. Apparently, they did, because on December 22nd, I got a certified letter from Patricia. This one was typed up like a legal document and stated that my truck was banned from parking on any subdivision streets at any time due to repeated violations of HOA regulations and refusal to comply with board directives. It said if my truck was spotted on subdivision property, it would be towed at my expense, and I would be fined $500 per occurrence. The letter also stated that I was not permitted to perform any commercial activities within the subdivision, including snow removal, and doing so would result in immediate legal action against me. I called my lawyer, a guy named Robert Chen, who had handled my business incorporation. He read the letter and actually laughed. "Jack, this is not legally enforceable. They cannot ban you from parking on a public street, and they definitely cannot stop you from operating a business out of your home unless the zoning laws prohibit it, which they do not. This is just harassment." So what do I do? You could ignore it, or you could show up at the next HOA meeting and challenge her publicly. Get the other homeowners involved. She sounds like she is on a power trip, and the only way to deal with that is to remove her from power. I decided to go to the next HOA meeting, which was scheduled for January 8th. In the meantime, Christmas came and went, and we got absolutely slammed with snow. A huge winter storm rolled through on December 28th and dropped 26 inches over 2 days. It was the kind of storm that makes the national news. I was working 70-hour shifts with my crew, plowing out businesses, hospitals, and residential clients. We were exhausted but making great money. The subdivision was a disaster. The roads were completely impassable. People were literally snowed in, unable to leave their homes. I watched from my front window as neighbors tried to dig out, only to get their cars stuck in the middle of the unplowed streets. One elderly couple, the Johnsons from 3 houses down, got their car stuck and had to abandon it. Mr. Johnson was in his 70s and had a bad hip. Watching him struggle through waist-deep snow to get back to his house made my blood boil. I called Patricia. She did not answer, so I left a message. "Patricia, this is Jack Morrison. The subdivision is in a state of emergency. People cannot get out. I am offering to plow the roads for free, no charge to the HOA, just to help our neighbors. Please call me back." She never called back. Instead, I got a text message from a number I did not recognize. It said, "Remove your truck from subdivision streets or it will be towed." This is your final warning." I looked outside. My truck was parked in my driveway. It had not been on the street in days. I responded. "Who is this?" The reply came back. "HOA board, we are monitoring your property." That creeped me out. I went outside and looked around. I did not see anyone, but the idea that Patricia or her cronies were watching my house felt like stalking. On December 30th, Mr. Johnson had a medical emergency. His wife called 911, but the ambulance could not get into the subdivision because the roads were blocked with snow. They had to send a fire department rescue vehicle with tracks, and even that took 45 minutes to arrive instead of the usual 10. Mr. Johnson ended up being okay. He had a minor heart attack, but the delay could have killed him. That night, I decided I was done playing nice. I hooked up my plow truck, drove to the entrance of the subdivision, and started clearing the main roads. I worked for 5 straight hours, clearing every street, pushing snow into the designated areas, and making sure every single home had access to get out. When I was finished, it was 3 a.m. and I was exhausted, but the roads were clear. The next morning, I woke up to someone pounding on my door. I stumbled downstairs in my pajamas and opened it to find Patricia standing there with a tow truck behind her and 2 guys in reflective vests standing next to my plow truck. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked. "I told you your truck was banned from subdivision property. I am having it towed." "It is in my driveway, on my property." "The plow blade is extending over the sidewalk, which is HOA property. That is a violation." I looked at my truck. The blade was angled and maybe 6 inches of it was over the sidewalk. It was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard. "You are insane. Get off my property." "I am enforcing HOA rules, Mr. Morrison. You have been warned repeatedly." One of the tow truck guys looked uncomfortable. "Madam, I do not think we can legally tow this. It is on his property." Patricia whirled on him. "I am paying you to do a job. Do it." The guy shook his head. "No, madam, I am not getting involved in a property dispute. You need to figure this out yourselves." He and his partner got back in their truck and drove away. Patricia's face was bright red. She turned back to me, her voice shaking with anger. "You think you are so smart, do not you? Plowing the roads without authorization, ignoring my directives. You are creating a liability for this HOA, and I will not tolerate it." "Patricia, I helped people. Families were trapped. Mr. Johnson nearly died because the ambulance could not get in." "That is not my problem. People chose to live here and they need to be prepared for winter weather. You are supposed to provide snow removal. It is what people pay their HOA dues for. I manage the budget as I see fit. If people do not like it, they can move." A few neighbors had come out of their houses to watch the confrontation. One of them, a woman named Sarah Martinez who lived across the street, walked over. "Patricia, what is wrong with you? Jack helped us. We could not get out of here." "Stay out of this, Sarah. This is between me and Mr. Morrison." "No, it is not. This affects all of us. You cut the snow removal service and now you are harassing the one person who actually helped us." More neighbors started gathering. I could see people on their porches watching. Patricia looked around and seemed to realize she was outnumbered. "There will be consequences for this," she said, pointing at me. Then she turned and walked back to her car, which was parked on the street. That afternoon, I got another certified letter. This one stated that I was being fined $2,000 for unauthorized commercial activity on HOA property, and that if I did not pay within 30 days, the HOA would place a lien on my house. I called Robert Chen again. He told me to bring all the letters and documentation to his office. When I showed him everything, he shook his head in disbelief. "Jack, this woman is completely out of control. The good news is none of this is legally enforceable. The bad news is she can make your life miserable with paperwork and legal fees if you let her. What do you recommend? Go to the HOA meeting. Bring all of this documentation. Bring neighbors who support you. Challenge her authority and call for a vote to remove her from the board. If enough homeowners show up, you can take control of the HOA back from her. I spent the next week talking to neighbors. I knocked on doors, made phone calls, and sent emails. I explained what Patricia had done, showed people the letters, and told them about the HOA meeting on January 8th. Almost everyone I talked to was furious with her. Many of them had their own stories of harassment and ridiculous demands from Patricia. Sarah Martinez told me that Patricia had fined her $300 for having a wreath on her front door that was not in keeping with the aesthetic standards of the community. Another neighbor, Dave Richardson, said Patricia had tried to make him cut down a tree in his yard because she did not like the way it looked. The tree was healthy and beautiful, and Dave had refused. Patricia then sent him a letter threatening to have it removed at his expense. The more I talked to people, the more I realized that Patricia had been terrorizing the entire neighborhood. She had just picked on me more because I stood up to her. January 8th arrived, and it was another snowy day. We had gotten 6 more inches overnight, and the subdivision roads were a mess again. I had not plowed them since the last time, sticking to my decision to let Patricia handle it. People were struggling again, but this time everyone knew why. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community clubhouse, a small building near the subdivision entrance that was used for events and meetings. I arrived at 6:45 and was shocked to see the parking lot was already full. People were parking on the street and walking in. Robert Chen met me at the entrance. "Looks like you got a good turnout," he said. "I am nervous as hell. Do not be. Just tell the truth and let the homeowners decide." We walked in together. The main room was set up with rows of chairs facing a small table at the front where Patricia, Deborah, and Tim were sitting. Every single seat was filled, and people were standing along the walls. I estimated there were at least 100 people there, maybe more. It was by far the largest turnout for an HOA meeting in the history of Riverside Heights. Patricia looked shocked when she saw the crowd. She had a stack of papers in front of her and a gavel, which seemed absurd for an HOA meeting. She banged it on the table. "This meeting will come to order. We have several items on the agenda tonight. I move that we skip the agenda and discuss the snow removal situation," someone shouted from the back. It was Dave Richardson. Several people applauded and voiced agreement. Patricia banged the gavel again. "That is not how this works. We will follow proper procedure." "Proper procedure?" Sarah Martinez stood up. "You have not followed proper procedure since you became president. You were not even legally elected." The room erupted in voices. People were shouting, agreeing, and arguing. Patricia kept banging the gavel, but nobody was paying attention to her. Robert Chen stood up. "Excuse me, everyone. My name is Robert Chen, and I am Mr. Morrison's attorney. I would like to address the board if I may." The room quieted down. Patricia looked like she wanted to object, but she could see she was losing control of the meeting. "Fine. Make it quick." Robert walked to the front of the room and turned to face everyone. "Thank you. I have reviewed the HOA bylaws for Riverside Heights, and I have some concerns about the current board's legitimacy. According to the bylaws, board members must be elected at an annual meeting with at least 20% of homeowners present, which would be 40 homes. The last election had 15 people present and did not meet the required quorum. Additionally, the bylaws require that any new rules or regulations be voted on by the full membership, not just the board. The current board has implemented numerous rules without proper authorization." Patricia stood up. That is ridiculous. The board has the authority to manage the community. Within the scope of the existing bylaws, yes, but you cannot create new rules without a membership vote. You also cannot levy fines for violations of rules that do not exist in the bylaws. Who are you to tell me what I can and cannot do? I am an attorney who specializes in HOA law, Mrs. Hendricks, and I am telling you that your actions are not legal. The room was silent. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. Deborah and Tim were both staring at the table, clearly uncomfortable. Robert continued. I propose that this body hold an emergency election tonight for a new HOA board. Per the bylaws, a special election can be called with a simple majority vote of members present. I count approximately 110 people in this room, which is well over 50% of the 200 homes in this community. You have a quorum. I second that motion, Dave Richardson shouted. All in favor? Robert asked. A chorus of voices said aye, and hands shot up all over the room. It was overwhelming. Opposed? Only 3 hands went up: Patricia, Deborah, and Tim. The motion passes. We will now hold nominations for a new board. Patricia was shaking with rage. This is a coup. You cannot do this. Actually, we can, Robert said calmly. It is in your bylaws, Section 7, Paragraph 3. Would you like me to read it? Patricia grabbed her papers and stood up. I am not going to sit here and be humiliated by a mob. I resign. She stormed toward the door. Wait, I said, standing up. You are not getting off that easy. She turned back, glaring at me. What do you want, Mr. Morrison? I want the $2,000 you tried to find me returned. I want an apology to every person in this room you have harassed. And I want you to explain why you cut the snow removal budget and put people's lives at risk. I do not owe you anything. Actually, you do, Robert interjected. If you improperly levied fines, you could be sued for harassment and damages. Not to mention if someone had been seriously hurt or killed due to the lack of snow removal, you could face criminal negligence charges. Patricia's face went pale. She looked around the room at all the angry faces staring at her. Fine. I will refund the fines. But I am done with this neighborhood. You people are ungrateful and horrible. She left, slamming the door behind her. Deborah and Tim both stood up. We resign too, Tim said. This is too much drama for us. After they left, the meeting continued. Nominations were made for a new board, and 3 people were elected. Sarah Martinez as president, Dave Richardson as vice president, and a retired accountant named Helen Foster as treasurer. The first order of business was to reinstate the snow removal budget and hire a company immediately. Then Sarah addressed me directly. Jack, the board would like to offer you a contract to handle snow removal for the subdivision. We know you are doing it out of the kindness of your heart, but you deserve to be paid for your work. Would you be interested? I was stunned. Absolutely. I would be happy to. The room applauded. Several people came up to shake my hand and thank me. Over the next few days, things started to return to normal. I signed a contract with the HOA to provide snow removal services for the rest of the winter at a fair rate. The first thing I did was clear all the roads again, which took about 6 hours. People waved and honked as I drove by, and several neighbors brought me coffee and snacks while I worked. Patricia put her house up for sale in late January. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she was moving to Florida. Nobody was sad to see her go, but the story did not end there. In early February, Sarah called me with disturbing news. Jack, we have been going through the HOA financial records, and there is a major problem. Patricia withdrew $8,000 from the HOA account in December. The notation says it was for legal fees, but we have not received any bills from attorneys. Helen has been trying to track it down, and it looks like Patricia just took the money. "That is embezzlement," I said. "We know. We are going to file a police report, but we wanted to give you a heads up since you were so involved in everything. Do whatever you need to do. That money belongs to the homeowners." 2 days later, I watched from my living room window as a police car pulled up to Patricia's house. 2 officers went inside and came out 30 minutes later with Patricia in handcuffs. She was crying and yelling something I could not hear from that distance. Her husband, a quiet man I had only seen a few times, stood on the porch looking devastated. It turned out that Patricia had been stealing from the HOA for months. The $8,000 was just the most recent withdrawal. Helen Foster discovered that Patricia had written herself checks for various fake expenses totaling over $20,000 since she became president. She had hidden it by creating fake invoices and receipts. The police charged her with embezzlement and fraud. The HOA hired a lawyer and sued her to recover the funds. Her house sold in March, and she ended up pleading guilty to the charges in April. She was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, 3 years probation, and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. The local news picked up the story, and it became a cautionary tale about HOA abuse of power. A reporter even came to interview me. I gave a brief statement about the importance of homeowners staying involved in their communities and not letting power-hungry people take control. Life in Riverside Heights improved dramatically after Patricia left. The new board was transparent, reasonable, and actually cared about the community. They sent out monthly newsletters with clear financial reports. They held quarterly meetings where anyone could voice concerns. And most importantly, they treated homeowners like adults instead of subjects to be ruled over. I continued to provide snow removal services for the subdivision throughout the winter. Every time it snowed, I would clear the roads, and people would thank me. It felt good to be appreciated instead of harassed. One Saturday afternoon in late March, after the last snow of the season had melted away, Sarah and Dave organized a neighborhood barbecue at the clubhouse. It was meant to be a celebration of getting through a difficult winter and a fresh start for the community. Nearly every family showed up. I was manning one of the grills when Mr. Johnson walked over with his wife. He had recovered fully from his heart attack and looked healthier than ever. "Jack, I wanted to thank you properly," he said, handing me an envelope. "Mr. Johnson, you do not need to thank me. Open it." Inside was a card signed by at least 50 neighbors and a gift certificate to a steakhouse in downtown Rochester. "You saved my life," Mr. Johnson said, his voice cracking with emotion. "If you had not cleared those roads that night, I do not think I would be standing here." The doctors said every minute counted. His wife hugged me, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for caring about us." I felt my own eyes getting wet. "You are welcome. I am just glad you are okay." As the afternoon went on, I realized something important. When I had started this whole battle with Patricia, I was just trying to protect my right to park my truck and run my business. But it had become about something much bigger. It was about community, about standing up to bullies, and about doing the right thing even when it is difficult. Patricia had tried to use the HOA as a weapon to control people and enrich herself. She had made people's lives miserable and put them in danger. But in the end, the community came together and stopped her. We took back control of our neighborhood and made it a better place. As I stood there at the barbecue, watching neighbors laugh and kids play, I felt proud of what we had accomplished. Riverside Heights was not perfect, but it was ours, and we were going to take care of it together. The following months were peaceful. Summer came, and I went back to my landscaping business. The new HOA board did their jobs quietly and efficiently. Property values in the subdivision actually increased because word spread that we had gotten rid of our toxic HOA president. People wanted to live in a community that actually functioned properly. In August, I got a call from a reporter at a regional magazine. They were doing a feature story about HOA horror stories and wanted to interview me. I agreed, and the article came out in October. It generated a lot of discussion about the need for HOA reform and homeowner rights. I even got calls from people in other states asking for advice on dealing with their own problem HOAs. I always gave them the same advice: stay involved, know your rights, and do not be afraid to stand up for yourself. HOAs are supposed to serve the community, not rule over it. When they forget that, it is up to the homeowners to remind them. One afternoon in November, almost a year after the whole mess started, I was in my driveway washing my truck when a car pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out, looking nervous. "Are you Jack Morrison?" she asked. "That is me. Can I help you?" "I am Rebecca Stone. My husband and I are thinking about buying a house in this subdivision. We have read about what happened last year, and I wanted to ask you about it. Is this a good place to live?" I smiled. "It is a great place to live. We had some problems, but we fixed them. The HOA is run by good people now, and everyone looks out for each other." "What about snow removal?" she asked, laughing. "That was a big part of the story. Snow removal is handled professionally, and if there is ever an emergency, neighbors help neighbors. That is how it should be." She thanked me and left. A few weeks later, I saw a moving truck at the house she had mentioned. She and her husband moved in, becoming the newest members of Riverside Heights. The first snow of the new winter season came in mid-November. I was ready with my plow truck, fully maintained and equipped. At 6 a.m., I started my route, beginning with the main roads in the subdivision as per my contract with the HOA. The streets were quiet, just the sound of my plow scraping pavement and the rumble of my truck's engine. As I made my way through the neighborhood, I noticed something different. People had put small reflective markers at the end of their driveways to help me see where the edges were in the dark. Someone had left a thermos of hot coffee on their mailbox with a note that said, "Thanks, Jack." Another family had made a sign that said, "Snow Hero," with an arrow pointing to the street. These small gestures meant more to me than any payment ever could. They showed that the community appreciated what I did, that I was valued as a neighbor and not just a service provider. I thought back to that day when Patricia had tried to have my truck towed, when she had banned me from the streets and threatened me with fines and legal action. She had tried to make me feel small and powerless. Instead, she had united the neighborhood against her and ultimately destroyed herself. The irony was not lost on me. By trying to punish me for helping people, she had shown everyone exactly what kind of person she was. By banning my truck from the streets during snow removal, she had made it impossible for anyone to ignore the problem. Her own cruelty had been her downfall. As I finished plowing the last street and headed home, the sun was just starting to rise. The neighborhood looked beautiful, covered in fresh snow, with clear roads running through it like black ribbons. Smoke was rising from chimneys as families woke up to a new day. Kids would be able to get to school, adults would be able to get to work, and everyone would be safe. That was all I had ever wanted: to help people, to be a good neighbor, and to make a living doing honest work. Patricia had tried to take that away from me, but she had failed. The community had stood with me, and together, we had won. I pulled into my driveway and parked my truck, the plow blade extending slightly over the sidewalk, just like it always did. Nobody was going to complain about it now. I sat there for a moment, engine idling, feeling grateful for everything that had happened. The struggle had been difficult, but it had brought out the best in people. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Martinez. "Roads look great. Thanks for taking care of us," I replied. "Anytime." That is what neighbors are for. And I meant it. Because at the end of the day, that is what community is all about. Not rules and regulations and power trips, but people taking care of each other, especially when times are tough. I got out of my truck and walked into my house, ready for breakfast and maybe a short nap before my next client appointments. Outside, the neighborhood was coming alive. Cars were starting, kids were laughing, and life was going on in Riverside Heights just like it should. Patricia was gone, serving her sentence and facing the consequences of her actions. The money she stole had been fully recovered through the sale of her house and a payment plan set up by her lawyer. The HOA was stronger and more transparent than ever. And I was still here, doing what I loved, in a community that appreciated me. As I made myself coffee and looked out my kitchen window at my truck sitting proudly in my driveway, I realized something important. I had won not because I was right, but because I refused to back down. I had stood up for myself and for my neighbors, even when it was difficult and scary. That courage had inspired others to do the same. The whole experience taught me that most bullies, whether they are running an HOA or anything else, rely on people being too tired or scared to fight back. They count on apathy and intimidation to maintain their power. But when people finally say enough is enough and stand together, bullies crumble surprisingly fast. Patricia had seemed so powerful and intimidating when she was sending those letters and making those threats. But in the end, she was just one person with no real authority and no legal standing. The moment the community challenged her, her whole facade fell apart. I thought about all the people who had come to that meeting in January, who had given up their evening to stand up for what was right. They did not have to do that. They could have stayed home, stayed comfortable, and let someone else deal with the problem. But they showed up. They voted. They made their voices heard. That was democracy at its most basic and most beautiful. People exercising their right to self-governance and taking control of their own community. It was the same principle that founded this country, just playing out on a smaller scale in a suburban subdivision in upstate New York. The months continued to pass. Spring came again, and I switched back to landscaping full-time. The subdivision looked beautiful with everyone's lawns greening up and flowers blooming. The new HOA board organized a community yard sale and a summer concert series at the clubhouse. People were engaged and happy. In May, I was working in my yard when a black sedan pulled up. A man in a suit got out and walked over to me. "Jack Morrison?" he asked. "That is me," I said a bit warily. I had learned to be cautious about unexpected visitors. "My name is Thomas Reed. I am a producer for a national cable news show. We are doing a segment on HOA abuses, and your story has come up multiple times in our research. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" I hesitated. I was not really interested in being on TV or making a big deal out of what had happened. On the other hand, if telling my story could help other people dealing with similar situations, maybe it was worth it. "What kind of show is it?" I asked. "We do investigative journalism, focusing on consumer protection and civil rights issues. HOAs have become a major problem across the country, and we think your story illustrates both the problem and the solution. You stood up, you organized your community, and you won. That is a message people need to hear." I thought about it for a minute. "Okay, I will do it. But I want to make sure you talk to other people from the neighborhood too. This was not just my fight, it was everyone's." "Absolutely. We would love to interview other homeowners and get a complete picture." The interview happened 2 weeks later. They brought cameras and lights and turned my living room into a temporary studio. I told them the whole story, from the first letter about my truck to the final resolution and Patricia's arrest. They interviewed Sarah, Dave, Mr. Johnson, and several other neighbors. They even got footage of the subdivision and my truck. The segment aired in July, and it generated a huge response. The show's website got thousands of comments from people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Several state legislators contacted me asking about potential HOA reform legislation. A law professor from Syracuse University wrote an article analyzing the case and using it as an example in HOA law. I became an accidental advocate for homeowner rights. I never sought out that role, but I embraced it because I saw how many people were suffering under abusive HOAs and did not know what to do. If my experience could light a path for them, then all the stress and struggle had been worth it. As the anniversary of that first confrontation with Patricia approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. A year ago, I was just trying to park my truck and do my job. Now I was a minor public figure, an advocate, and a symbol of standing up to petty tyranny. But more than any of that, I was just a guy who loved his neighborhood and his neighbors. I was someone who believed that communities work best when people treat each other with respect and kindness. I was someone who refused to let a bully push him around. The December snow came again, right on schedule. This time there was no drama, no confrontations, no threats. I plowed the roads according to my contract, people thanked me, and life went on. It was exactly as boring and normal as it should be. One evening, as I was coming home from a plowing job, I saw new neighbors moving into Patricia's old house. A young couple with 2 small kids. I pulled over and introduced myself, welcoming them to Riverside Heights. "We have heard this is a great neighborhood," the husband said. "The realtor told us you guys had some HOA drama but got it all sorted out." "We did," I said. "But that is in the past. Now we just focus on being good neighbors and taking care of each other." "That sounds perfect," his wife said, smiling. "We are looking forward to being part of this community." As I drove the last block to my house, I felt a deep sense of contentment. Riverside Heights was exactly what a neighborhood should be now. Safe, friendly, well-maintained, and free from tyranny both big and small. My truck pulled into my driveway, and I sat there for a moment before going inside. The streets were clear. The lights from houses glowed warm in the winter darkness, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear kids laughing as they built a snowman. This was home. This was community. This was what I had fought for, and this was what we had won. I turned off the engine and headed inside, where my own warm house was waiting. Tomorrow would bring more snow, more work, and more of the regular rhythms of life in Riverside Heights. And that was exactly how it should be. The story of how the HOA banned my truck from the street during snow removal, and how I stopped clearing their roads entirely in response, had become neighborhood legend. New residents heard about it when they moved in. Kids who were too young to remember asked their parents about it. And those of us who lived through it would occasionally meet at the clubhouse or someone's backyard and share a laugh about the whole crazy situation. But underneath the humor and the storytelling was a serious truth. We had learned that freedom requires vigilance, that rights must be defended, and that communities are only as good as the people who care enough to fight for them. I had been pushed to the edge by Patricia's unreasonable demands and harassment. I could have moved away, given up, or just accepted her abuse. Instead, I stood my ground, and my neighbors stood with me. Together, we proved that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they choose to use it. As I settled into my favorite chair that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from the new HOA board. It was the minutes from their latest meeting, sent to all homeowners for transparency. I skimmed through it, budget reports, upcoming events, a discussion about playground equipment for the small park near the entrance. Normal stuff. Boring stuff. Exactly the kind of stuff an HOA should be dealing with. I smiled and set my phone down. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, blanketing the subdivision in white. My plow truck sat ready in the driveway, waiting for morning when I would fire it up and clear the roads again. Some people might think that was a mundane ending to a dramatic story. But to me, it was perfect. The return to normalcy, to community functioning as it should, was the whole point. We had fought not for glory or recognition, but for the simple right to live our lives in peace. And now we had it. The roads would be cleared, the kids would get to school, people would get to work, and life would continue in Riverside Heights. Not because someone was forced to help or threatened with fines, but because we chose to take care of each other. That was the real victory. Not defeating Patricia, not the news coverage, not becoming an advocate. The real victory was building a community where people actually wanted to help their neighbors, where the HOA served instead of ruled, and where a guy could park his plow truck in his own damn driveway without being harassed. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would be another snowy day in Rochester, New York. The roads would need clearing, clients would need service, and my neighbors would need help. And I would be there, just like always, doing what needed to be done. Because that is what good neighbors do. They show up. They help out. They stand up when necessary and pitch in without being asked. They build communities worth living in, one cleared road and one kind gesture at a time. The HOA had banned my truck from the street during snow removal, so I stopped clearing their roads entirely. That decision led to a chain of events that changed our entire neighborhood for the better. Sometimes standing up for yourself ends up standing up for everyone, and sometimes the smallest acts of resistance lead to the biggest changes. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I was grateful for the whole experience, even the difficult parts. It had taught me about courage, community, and the power of ordinary people to make extraordinary changes when they decide enough is enough. Riverside Heights was home now more than ever, and I was proud to be part of it. The snow would keep falling, winters would keep coming, and I would keep clearing the roads. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because these were my neighbors, my friends, my community, and that made all the difference.